join us by phone. She's coming back from another meeting. So if we're
You-
ready, we can begin.
Yes, you are.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the West Hartford Virtual Public Safety Committee meeting. Today's date is Wednesday, March 2nd, and the time is 6:30 p.m. I'd like to welcome everybody around the virtual table and acknowledge our acting town manager, Mr. Rick Ledwood.
Good evening, Madam Chair and councilors.
Also, we have Chief Riddick and Chief Priest, along with AC Callahan and AC O'Callahan and Grimaldi, and also AC Rockabon. Yes, and then we have Counselor Alberto Cortez, Counselor Mary Fay, and Counselor Adrian Billings-Smith. And I don't think I forgot anybody. And as I said, the mayor will be joining us shortly. Before we actually jump into the agenda, it is with a very heavy heart, okay, that I open up the meeting because of our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. And my heart has just been heavy since this whole ordeal began. And I just can't proceed to this meeting without really asking all of us for a moment of silence. You know, my heart is very heavy, and my thoughts and prayers go out to the family members in the Ukraine, as well as our residents here in West Hartford and in the US of A, who are just with their family members right now as they just endure this terrible, terrible, I don't even know what you call it, because it's just past a nightmare. I just can't even imagine it. So let's just kind of bow our heads, or just give this a moment of silence before we proceed. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So as we begin the agenda, we do have some items on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from our last two meetings, January 5th, 2022 and February 2nd, 2022. If there's no objections with any corrections that may need to happen, I would like us to accept and approve the minutes. All right, good. Hearing none, we'll go forward and have those minutes approved. All right, and then the next item is our communications, and moving into staff reports. So why don't we start with the fire department update? And so I'll turn it over to you, Chief Priest, and staff.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, councilors. Good to see everyone this evening. Greg Priest, Fire Chief. I have a written report has been submitted by Chief O'Callahan. Thank you, Chief, for getting that in, bridging a few days of vacation. So that is there. Glad to answer any questions that you may have on that. Just a few points on it. The first, I just wanted to thank those councilors in attendance and those present who came to our promotional ceremony the other day. That's a very, very important recognition time for our staff. And as we are returning to these pre-pandemic conditions and really getting back together and trying to do ceremonies, we're looking forward to having you come back and watching us evolve and really improve and standardize in those processes. And it's really nice to see the support of the council. So I look forward to seeing you there again and seeing our best efforts for all of our future ceremonies. We have been plagued with a few supply chain issues that are affecting both our stations and that are affecting our vehicles as well. These are topics that have come up before with public safety, but I just wanted to evidence that we had some pretty significant issues that have occurred lately, which is we continue to suffer from vehicle parts supply chain issues. So we've had several vehicles go down and have taken quite some time to be able to be repaired. I think we've recovered most of them right at the moment. I think we still have one out of service, and this is predominantly in our light vehicles, but it is something that I wanted to make the committee aware of. Additionally, we had a very significant period of time where we went without heat in our station number 5, and this is a pretty significant issue. Obviously, we're critical infrastructure for the town. The location of our fire stations are very important to us, so being able to occupy and maintain them is important. But we suffered a boiler issue, and it was incredibly frustrating for everybody involved. Facilities really worked very hard to try and assist us, but there were circuit board issues and some fuse issues. Really what ends up happening is it affects the patients of everyone involved. So I just wanted to thank Town Manager Ledwith for really staying involved in this as well, helping to work with facilities, and also to Chief O'Callahan and our folks who have kind of put up with that. To the best of my knowledge, the heat has been restored, but I did want to bring it to your attention again. And as we go through the budgetary process, I do look forward to your support of our capital improvement program, which involves we have a facility study that will be coming, but also for some vehicles and our fire department infrastructure as well. And then the last business item that I have for the council, I'm very, very, very pleased to report this. Some of our council members with more tenure, such as Ms. Fay, will know that this goes back quite some time. But I'm pleased that we have been able to negotiate a service contract with American Medical Response to be our transport provider for town. This will, the most predominant issue coming from the contract itself is that we will have one single dedicated ambulance 24 hours a day, and then we'll have 2 ambulances on during the day shift, which is when we have our busiest hours. These ambulances will be, for lack of a better term, dedicated to us at our disposal. They're dispatched with performance metrics that will allow us to have better data about how long it takes to get ambulances. We'll have direct communication with them with radios, and we're very, very pleased about that. They will integrate well with our resources, and I'd like to thank Chief O'Callahan and Dispatch Manager Todd Hungerford. They've worked incredibly hard on that to make that work well. So I believe we'll be improving our EMS system with that. And as part of that, we've also negotiated what's called a bundle billing agreement with them, which will improve our revenue line for our for the amount of money that can come back in for Medicaid patients. But as I launch that, I would like to very much stress this. This was money that was being, for lack of a better term, left on the table. It wasn't being billed. This is something that kind of occurred about the time that we were starting our paramedic program, so that while we will be recovering some additional funds from this, it won't be coming at the cost of the taxpayer. It's going to be coming from the federal payer through American Medical Response. So I'm pleased to be able to announce that. I look forward to better service and a little bit better cost recovery. And that concludes my verbal part of my report, and I would be glad to take any questions that you may have of me.
Thank you, Chief Priest. And I see Counselor Fay and then Counselor Billing-Smith. Over to you, Counselor Fay.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Anderson. So, Mr. Priest, Chief Priest, we've been through this. We had a lot of customer issues on the billing side. I'm hoping that that's going to be resolved and people won't see these, huge ambulance bills should they need the service. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. So I think this council may or may not have heard me say kind of my explanation for how billing works or how our EMS is financed, but the tax dollars go to provide for the availability of having that service 24 hours a day, having trained paramedics with the equipment ready to go. And when a bill does get sent to a patient, it's because they've received an additional service. We're consuming the medical equipment, we're bringing them to the hospital in their time to do that. So when we do bill, we do it under a regulatory structure set by the state of Connecticut, morally, ethically, legally. We bill all patients. So the issue that you're referring to, Counselor, if I'm correct, is early on in the paramedic program, patients were receiving multiple bills and were concerned because they were seeing the full amounts of both bills from the fire department and also from the ambulance company. And this was for patients with Medicare, and that was creating some significant concern. That's our older population, who are generally on fixed incomes. What this agreement does, Counselor, is this will allow for one single bill to go to Medicare that will have an additional advanced life support charge on top of it, and that comes with an associated rate. AMR collects that portion for the town of West Hartford, and then that money comes back to us. There isn't any new charges that are going to the Medicare patient as well, but what was happening before is we were not able to bill Medicare because Medicare will only accept one bill. So there was money being left on the table. So through this agreement, we've cleaned up that issue that you speak of, ma'am, to the best of my knowledge. Certainly, this is something that we know has been a very sensitive topic. I'll be watching it very closely, both our revenue lines, but also the satisfaction as well. And then I would also say we try and keep our website updated as well on this, because we do know that there are citizens with a lot of questions about this. And then, as always, I have an outstanding staff that works with us in our billing department. And inside the fire administration, we're always willing to answer any questions and help navigate people through either just education or through individual circumstances where they may be having an issue or a challenge or a question.
Thank you, Chief Priest. Counselor Fay? Any other questions?
No, and I was very pleased to hear that. We did have a lot of concerned seniors. It's very complicated, the whole medical billing process to begin with, as you can imagine, and some of the charges that before weren't even due from them per se. So I'm very pleased to hear that that's going to be cleaned up. So thank you, Chief. This is really good. Thank you.
Okay, Counselor Billing-Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Chief Priest. How are you?
Well, Counselor, thank you very much for asking.
Good. So you talked about station number 5 without heat. In your facility studies, you'll be providing assessments of things of that sort for all of the stations so that we're aware if there are any other issues so we can be proactive in that situation?
Yes, ma'am. So as I may or may not have alluded to anytime recently on these meetings, the Fitch study was commissioned quite some time ago. And I believe their specific wording is that our facilities are outdated at maximum capacity. So through the foresight of the previous town manager and now going through with town manager Ledwith, we are looking at a facility study that will look at all elements of our facilities so that we can understand both conditions, but also a reasonable and incremental path forward for how we would accomplish fixing them and updating them to current standards. I should be clear, I don't think there is anything wrong with the age of the boiler at Station 5, but there were certainly some very significant supply chain issues that left us in a precarious position for a little bit of time. And I'm hopeful that a facility study will encompass all aspects of our facilities.
Thank you. One more question. In terms of the area dealing with staff and training, I see in each of our meetings that we are talking about implementing more DEI training and other trainings of that sort. Do you have a time frame that you're looking at in terms of doing that? Have you built out anything to provide?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I could not be more pleased to let you know that we're working with KJR Consulting. That's the town's DEI consultant. He's actually engaged me personally in some discussions about the training for the fire service specifically. We certainly have a different, type of workplace. And we have a lot of work to do in a lot of areas around that. The training is ongoing right now. And then one of the things actually that I'm really pleased to be hearing is that the town's new diversity and equity officer search is ongoing. And I look forward to working very closely with that person. But the specific and direct answer is the training is actually ongoing. I think we've done about 2 of the groups so far. We have 4, and I would look to Chief O'Callahan to fill in any gaps.
Sir, you're correct. We've and based on some vacation time, we've got almost the entire department through the training, and with some really good feedback. A very enjoyable class. So,
Great. Thank you both so much.
Thank
That's
you.
all.
Counselor Billing-Smith, Town Manager Ledwith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. As a follow-up to the Vice Chair's question to the Chief. We are holding a finalist interview tomorrow for our equity officer position, so we're very excited about that. Assuming everything goes well tomorrow, I will be back in touch with the town council in terms of next steps in that process. So hopefully, fingers crossed, everything goes well tomorrow. We'll have some good news to report for everyone, for the council and for the entire organization. In addition to the vice chair's previous question regarding the facilities study, Bob Palmer, who's our director of plant facility services, is currently working on an RFP. And we will be issuing an RFP to find someone to help us with a facility study, not just for the fire department, for the police station as well. So it will encompass both police and fire. So more to follow on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that update, Mr. Ledwood and Town Councilor Cortez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know if this is for you, Town Manager Ledwith, or for for Chief Priest, but it's what's the timeline for that facility report? You know, I know it's time consuming, but is that something that's gonna, go on for several months, or when's kind of like ETA?
Yep. So I will follow up with him with an exact timeline. He and I talked over the weekend, as a matter of fact, because of what happened at Station 5. So, and he did at that point said he was finalizing the RFP at that point. So say we're going to issue it in the next few weeks, and we will have to interview obviously vendors. That will take by the time we get through that interview process and we actually contract with someone, it'll probably be somewhere in the April-May timeframe. And then from there, the study itself will take several months with that person, with that firm being on board, spending time at all 5 of our facilities as well as the police station.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Councilor Cortez. I do have a question for you, Chief Priest. During the time the boiler issue was problematic, what did you do during the interim to provide heat? Or not? But I am hoping that you did. So what were some interim measures that you introduced?
Sure. Greg Priest, Fire Chief. I think that's our protocol, right? I'm supposed to answer that way. I apologize if I haven't. Madam Chair, the first thing is we ensured that all the living spaces had portable heating devices, safe, approved portable heating devices. I said that specifically for Assistant Chief Grimaldi, so he wouldn't think that we were running extension cords or doing anything inappropriate. But we did run them inside of both the bays and as well in our living areas. Conditions were monitored by our battalion chiefs. In addition, as the temperatures grew a little bit colder, I believe they brought in some propane heaters where we had to monitor for some carbon monoxide as well. So these are issues that become fairly, serious where we're watching it. We also had plans to shut down the station and move them to a different firehouse as well. And then I think I've covered everything, but Chief O'Callahan has been on point for the last couple of days. We've been chasing this around for a week, but Chief, did I miss anything on what we've done for that? Okay, so I think
You hit everything. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that update. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Chief Priest, for the report. And so we'll move to Chief Riddick for the police department update and staff report.
All right, good evening, everyone. How are you?
Well,
All right, we have a few things to go over. I'll apologize if maybe I'm a little bit long-winded. Hopefully I will not. A couple things. One, hiring and retention. We currently have 13 vacancies. We have 7 members who are eligible for retirement within the next 10 months. 4 of those 7 have already given us their intent to retire within the next 3 months. So we continue to deal with staffing issues. We have 2 officers in field training and 6 recruits in the various police academies across the state. We rolled out, as you've probably seen with the news release, our Axon body cameras were deployed in the field on February 14th. As far as motor vehicle accidents and stops thus far this year, through February, we've had 151 motor vehicle accidents and 139 car stops, February of 2021. And compared to this year in 2022, we have 148 motor vehicle accidents and also 139 car stops. So we did check that number 4 times. It's pretty incredible. We have the same amount of car stops within a year. Regarding our social worker, she's working out very well. Year to date, we've referred 34 cases to the police liaison social worker. And as a reminder, with the help of the previous town manager and the mayor, we have our partnership with Interval House, and our stats for our January stats, because our February stats have not been compiled yet with Interval House. We had 9 lethality assessment screens. And let's read off a couple of the questions just as a reminder. So these, of those 9 screenings, 4 were considered high danger. So what triggers a screening? So just a couple of things. A response of yes to any of the next 3 questions is an automatic screening and a call from us to Interval House. 1, has he or she ever used a weapon against you or threatened a weapon? 2, has she or he threatened to kill you or the children? 3, do you think he or she might try and kill you? Any answer in the affirmative there is an automatic referral for lethality assessment. And then any 4 of the next several questions will also trigger that. Does he or she have a gun? Have they ever choked you? Has he or she been violent or consistently jealous in the past? Is he or she employed? Has he or she ever tried to kill himself or herself? Do you have a child that he or she knows is not theirs? And does he or she follow or spy on you or leave threatening messages? So those are some of the triggers for lethality assessment, which we try to provide assistance to the victims and get them their help. There's no obligation. They can turn down this assistance. We cannot force that upon them. Madam Chair, at the last meeting, you had made the request regarding pistol permits. We talked about that and the demographics. We did not keep that data previously, but I do want you to know we're still working compiling that starting this year. So we'll have demographics by gender. We will not be keeping any demographics by any race or anything else, but by gender, we'll keep that. So we should have that information by the next meeting for year to date. Notable recent police activities. Unfortunately, we've been in the news for, not the best reasons. We are still working actively, pursuing leads with the carjacking that occurred on Cody Street, if you recall, on February 20th, with the 71-year-old woman who was carjacked in broad daylight. Just astounding. So we're still working that. We did recover the vehicle. We processed it for prints and any other evidentiary value. We're still working the parking lot distraction thefts. If you recall, one occurred on Whole Foods on North Main Street on February 1st, and then on the Britton Ave, Trader Joe's on February 22nd. We're collaborating with the Westport Police Department. There seems to be some similarities. We put out pictures on social media with the news release regarding that. So we're following some credit cards, and hopefully we'll identify these folks with that group effort. And also during the news release, we gave some tips on what people should be doing. Be wary of strangers. If someone comes to your car and offers assistance regarding a flat tire, be cautious of that. Probably stay in your car and lock the door. And normally when these type of situations occur, they're normally people who are very well spoken and very well dressed. Not to seem suspicious, and not that someone who is not well dressed and who's not well spoken is suspicious, but that just seems to be what we have coming here. As a follow-up to the February 9th South Street shots fired incident, really good police work by our patrol officers and especially our detectives and our community support unit. We did make one arrest, not the shooter. We're still working that component, but someone who was part of that. and that individual was arrested for conspiracy to commit assault first and reckless endangerment in the first degree. So really, really good old-fashioned police work to find some leads, develop information as far as evidence, and to get an arrest warrant signed by the judge. Really good. The Still pursuing and looking into the Uber stabbing. We have not made an arrest. If you recall, that occurred on February 25th. There was a fight between an Uber and two occupants of the Uber. We're still fleshing out the stories there. It's very complicated, to say the least, and we hope to make some type of arrest with that going forward, or at least fleshing out what occurred. On more of a positive note, our HANIC program, we started that in January, and with our second meeting this past week or two in February. We have 20 participants between the grades of 3rd grade and 8th grade. And as a reminder, we assist them with homework, de-escalation and conflict resolution techniques, internet safety, social skills, and fun group activities. We also partnered with a bunch of restaurants and other places who are donating some food for snacks and for a big party for the kids at the end of the program. So a lot of good stuff happening. Next, and if you can cue up the PowerPoint, Gerida, I have a very short PowerPoint, and I want to bring your attention to, if you haven't seen the Bridgewater, New Jersey video that occurred, and we played this and discussed this for our command staff, and Gerida, the screen is blank. So it's, if you recall, there was a fight that occurred within the mall with some youth. One appeared to be a high school age individual. Another one, I think, was 7th or 8th grade. The officers responded. Thank you, Gerida. And if you can, if you want to click on that link, it should load up. I think you have to put the full screen up for it to work.
Give me a moment to cue the video.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And what's been at dispute is the officer's response on and what appears to be a different treatment. We're not really sure why that treatment was different. And we discussed this during our staff meetings without passing judgment, but just to see what would we do, what should we do, and just to hear a take from our personnel. In addition to our command staff members, we also, thank you, Gerida, we also had this played at our roll calls. If you can just play that, thank you.
No, bro. Chill. Ryan, get up. Ryan, leave.
It's hard to see with the blurred out, but the individual who's sitting down is appears to be white, and the individual on the ground appears to be black. It later turns out that the person standing
No,
is
it's
of
'cause he's
Hispanic
black.
descent.
Racially motivated.
All right, do me a favor, it's a really short video. Can you just play it again for those who had not seen it before to get a little bit of flavor? I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Right out there, go right here. Get up.
You see, he put his hands in his face, he puts his hands away.
Come on. Yo! No, bro. Chill. Ryan, get up. Ryan, leave.
Now pay attention, the individual that's sitting on a chair is going to stand up, which he shouldn't be doing. And he's also going to offer himself to get handcuffed on 2 separate occasions.
Because he's black.
Handcuffed. He's going to put his hands up to be handcuffed.
Motivated.
One right there. And the video stopped. You can see his hands, and that's number 2. You see his hands initially to get handcuffed. Thank you, Gerida. So we discussed like why you can keep that PowerPoint ready. So I'm gonna go to the justice slide, but don't pull it up yet, Gerida. But just get that queued up. I think it's the 2nd or 3rd slide after that. So we discussed tactically, just from the use of force, keep all other factors out. As a chief, and if we were to give this to our internal affairs, where it would go, professional standards, that's how I would want them to investigate this matter. Because you don't want to jump to conclusions, because that's very, very important. And a lot of what the press and I think even the governor of New Jersey had said, well, it's racially motivated. We have to be careful as investigators not to jump to conclusions. We have to just pull things one by one. So what I like to do, and I instruct my investigators, is what's the policy say? Was it followed? If not, why not? And as you start going through this thing piece by piece, have the officers explain their actions. Why did you do what you did? Based upon what? And as you slowly pull this apart, you see what's left. And as you look at different factors, well, what is left to justify this? One, a lot of focus has been made on the force that was used on the individual on the ground. At the end of the day, to me, that's not the bigger issue, because the issue should have been force for both of them. So the question is, why did the other officer not use force and not handcuff the other individual? Because they both were fighting. One explanation we discussed was maybe they had additional information on the individual who was on the ground, who may have been an instigator. Maybe they have a previous history with the individual, the darker skinned person who they knew in the past. Oh, okay. Something else, well, they pulled the first individual off who was on top, who appeared to be the aggressor, and he was compliant. Fine. And then finally, one individual says, well, there's something else we have to consider here, that it could have been, race could have been part of this. And that's the eureka, oh my gosh, moment that you want. You have to go piece by piece by piece. In my professional opinion, again, I only have this one video of this. It doesn't make any sense why a person who's on the bottom and the person who is on top of them is pulled off. And if you watch the video, both of the officers actually pull off the lighter complexion person off the black male. And then you totally disengage. That is impossible. You don't do that. All right. So you're dealing with the arrest on the ground. Number 2, the female officer turns her back to the individual who's just involved in an altercation. That's a no-no. And she's had to explain why she did that and why she knew just that quickly that that person was not a threat. Next, the individual's on the ground getting handcuffed. Doesn't appear to be resisting. That's fine. Why is there a need for another officer to get on the ground to assist the officer with the arrest when you have another person involved with the situation who's standing right there? There is nothing that you can see, in my humble opinion, to justify a need for a second officer to assist with that arrest at the expense of leaving another combatant alone. While they're doing the handcuffing, it appears there's knees on the back. We can have discussions on that. That's really not too bad. It's not at the neck. But for that arrest, it doesn't appear to be necessary, right? It doesn't appear to be fighting back. So they have to explain all of that. While they are effecting the arrest, the individual stands up over the previous combatant and the police officers. Why are you not taking action against that individual? They have to answer for that. There's not going to be a policy to say that's okay. It just doesn't make any sense. So that's what we discussed. I was asked, what would I do as far as administrative action? Would I pull them from the street? And I would do that for two reasons. One, they got some explaining to do, as Ricky would say with Lucy. And for those of you old enough to remember that, there's some explaining to do. We need to find out if you know what the policy is, why you did what you did, and everything else. Number two, regardless of that, given what occurred, everybody knows these officers now, and they would be quote unquote targets if they were. They could not even do their job. Cameras would be following them, and they cannot be on the street until this would be adjudicated. So I would place them on administrative duty with pay, pending the outcome of the professional standards investigation. These are the very difficult discussions that we have in the West Hartford Police Department. We pick it apart piece by piece, and we cannot deny, in my humble opinion, that race also needs to be looked at in here. Does that mean that we can definitively say that these officers went after the black male because he was black? I don't think you'll ever be able to find that out unless you check out their histories and find out if there's other issues here or they admit to it. But could there be a bias? Could there be a preconceived subconscious bias that they might not even be aware of, and they just assumed through what they saw that that person was the aggressor? Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think that's plausible. In addition to lack of training, lack of policy, and just the proper way to effect the arrest. And I believe when you break down these situations like that and you see what's left and what's sticking, you get away from all the finger pointing and everything else. You can have constructive conversations. You can work on these things. And then we have to admit that race could be a part of this. I can't find, well, let me not say that. I'll stop. Anyways, so that's what we did in our staff meeting, and we brought this to our roll calls. Gerardi, can you pull up that justice slide, please? What the public expects from law enforcement is justice, the fair application of the law, or just fairness across the board, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, or anything. Slide 4, please. We see the definition is, and the next one too, Gerardi. Thank you. All you want is when similarly situated individuals receive similar outcomes. This slide was constructed by Dr. Lorenzo Boyd. He's nationally known. He works at UNH. He's a professor there. He's been on CNN, Fox News. He's always called. He's been to Ferguson. He's brought there as an expert. And we have him right here in Connecticut. And I'm glad to say that somebody I know and that I can learn from on a good way to present these things. So I'm grateful for him for sharing his material with me that I can in turn share with our officers. And when we look at this justice and we look at what we're doing out here as officers and law enforcement, we have to keep that in mind. And if you apply this overlay to this situation that we saw in Bridgewater, was justice served? That's the question. And that's why we have some of these problems. Thank you, Gerardi. I'm good with that. And in closing, if you can cue up the next video. As a close of Black History Month, 2 days ago, Sergeant Amanda Martin did a fabulous job. She works in our administrative component of the police department, dealing with our body cams, our social media, and everything else. She is phenomenal, and she put this together as a tribute and as a good closing to Black History. We've put this out already in our social media, so many of you may have seen this already. If you have not seen it, I like to get your input if you care to share, but credit goes to her. And if you're ready to play that, Gerardi, with the sound, thank you. We're missing the sound.
All we need is hope. And for that we have each other. And for that we have each other. And we will rise. We will
The audio's fading out, right? I'm not sure if you hear that or not.
I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again, and we'll rise. The waves will rise in spite of the ache. 1,000 times again.
Whatever you start, give it your best. The opportunities are there to be anything you want to be, but wanting to be someone is not enough. Dreaming about it is not enough. Thinking about it is not enough. You've got to study for it, work for it, fight for it with all your heart and soul, because nobody is going to hand it to you.
Thank you, Gerard. I apologize for the audio problems, but again, it's on our social media, our Instagram and Facebook. If you have a chance, check it out. Again, credit goes to Sergeant Amanda Martin, for putting this together as we close out Black History Month. We asked those persons of color to participate. Some chose to, some chose not to, and that's their choice. There's no problem with that. But I think it was well done, and I'm very appreciative of her for bringing this venture to us. That being said, my report is now over. Thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you, Chief Priest. That was beautiful and a great report. Before I comment or question, I'll ask everybody around the table if you have any questions. Chief Priest, did you have something that you wanted to add? Okay. Counselors, do you have any questions or comments? Counselor Cortez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that I saw the video a few weeks ago, and amazing job. Thank you for putting that together, and then also thank you for sharing the slides and the video from before, and sharing it in your roll calls and having the discussions. There was a lot of bad things there. It triggered me for many ways, being in a situation that's that youth, and also working in the field. I had a similar situation, and it led to 7 discs in my back being messed up, and I'm paying for it ever since then. As far as turning the back on someone, you never do it, compliant or not. That being said, I'm having concerns, just with what's been going on. I feel that the past week has been a violent week, with the armed robbery, the carjacking, stabbing, and then you add the distraction thefts. We haven't seen stuff like that in West Hartford in a long time. And I know that you guys are doing everything you can do, because you can't be everywhere at once. We can't have that's it's not realistic. My only concern with the actions from last week was one of the armed robberies that took place at the Whole Foods parking lot. We weren't made aware. Nothing came out for a week later, and I don't need to hear what happens after the investigation, but with something like that going on, whether we feel it's isolated or not, I think we owe it to the public to let them know, hey, we have an issue. We can't talk about it. Armed robbery, that's it, at this place. And you don't need to be concerned. I mean, we can keep it at a minimum, but to wait a week to get that information sent to us, it's concerning. I know you're very transparent. You're more than transparent. But we can't. I don't feel that we could have that. And then also, as council members, what can we do? Because again, you guys do an amazing job. You know, I see it. You guys are out in the public. Customer service comes to mind when I see you guys, doing interactions throughout the community when I'm out there. Um, we joke around. It's like, hey, it's like the Beverly Hills Cops. That's kind of what we are, and very professional. But as a public safety committee, what can we do? When I ran for town council, this was one of my concerns. Things are getting worse, and to have one violent week like we did last week in February, how do we get ahead of that? I threw a lot. I'm sorry, but those were my comments.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can respond.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Cortez, and over to you, Chief.
All right. First, and I say this with the utmost of respect for this board and the town council, but I want to remind everyone here, I've been very consistent that as chief, there's going to be times I'm going to make a decision not to notify you. Based upon investigatory stuff that we're doing and investigations and some leads that we're pursuing, and I'm willing to take responsibility for some of the pushback. I get it. I understand. If it was a situation that I thought that it was a danger to the public at large, I think we have to weigh that too. So I take responsibility for that. I don't disagree with that decision, and with all due respect, if it happened tomorrow, I'd do the same thing. And that's just the way it's going to be. There's many times we're going to get in front of things, we'll give you the information right away, but there's going to be times where we're just not. And I don't know what to tell you, but I did, and you weren't here, Councilor Cortez, but I did prep people regarding this, that's my call. And there's times I'm going to do that. As far as the assistance and the help, you've been fabulous. And we've got the support. As soon as you guys give us a new police building, we'll be fine. But other than that, when things come up and we're looking for money, if we're looking for programs, looking for support at the legislature, that's where we need the assistance and for some of the changes. And with the support that we've gotten, we've got the next day arraignments for the serious juvenile offenses. We have the, not to take into the custody, what's it called? Oh my gosh, not the TIC. Rob, what's the other, not the TIC, the other one would take people into custody for serious crimes. I can't think of it. It'll come back to me. But we got that changed. So now we can go through standards. We can go to a judge that same day and take the individual or that juvenile into custody without waiting. So these are good things that have changed and to the benefit. So I appreciate the question. I appreciate the questioning and pushing back on us and our decision making. I understand it. No hard feelings, but that's what I'm going to do from time to time. But it'll be less frequent. How many times has occurred since I've been here? I think twice, maybe 3 times in 4 years. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chief. And Councilor Fay, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chief Riddick, for explaining that, because you need the latitude to do your job and you're the expert, not us. So I certainly do appreciate how you do things and what you need to do. And sometimes details can't be shown. But I think I kind of started the ball rolling on the Whole Foods because I called Mr. Ledwith and said, is this true? So we're all going to be uncomfortable when we don't have information because people come to us. But we're professionals, and I'm going to put my trust in you that you're going to do the right thing. And you need the latitude. I think the police not having the backing with the police accountability bill, and I don't know if that's going to change going forward, but we need to do everything we can to support you, but also respect your professionalism and what you're doing. And there's going to be times it just puts us in a really weird spot because everybody comes to us as the first line of defense when they hear things. And I don't want to add to the rumor mill, so I don't say anything. If I don't know anything, I don't know anything. But it's just a tough spot. And I think crime is on everybody's mind, especially when things happen like this so quickly. So I just want to give you that perspective, but I want you to know, and I think I've shared this with you many times, I'm not going to question how you do your job. I don't know how to do that job. And you're a professional. So you do need to control how you handle situations. And I know investigations can be botched when too many details are given out front. So I'm glad Alberto raised it because it was a tough week for us on the front lines. But you're going to do your job and you do it well. So that's enough for me on the soapbox. But I just did have a question about, I know you don't have the statistics lately, but is there a way for us to get a little bit more of a drill down? Because I think it's pretty high level that we see with car thefts, larceny, burglary. I forget what the other categories are. But is there a way that we can get a little bit more finite with, I think armed versus unarmed is a big deal. Like if somebody takes your car and there's no gun that you could get killed with, it's a little bit of a different situation than somebody with a gun against your head and your kid in the car and they hurt you. Like the kidnapping in Marlboro, I think is the one they're just finally getting closer on that. That was a while ago. That was 6 or 7 months ago. So I think people are really on edge. I think and probably fairly so with what's been happening. But we support you fully.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, over to you, Chief.
Okay. A couple of things. One, I just want to remind everyone, we did end the year with a decrease in Part 1 crime. That's our serious crime. And the one category that it was a significant increase was robbery. And we did talk about that. And we haven't, in ending February, we're still working on our February stats. We're still trending down for Part 1, which is murder, sexual assault, aggravated assault, stolen motor vehicles, and things like that. So that's still trending downward, but the thing that's still going up is the robberies. And as far as the drill down, we've started to do that because understand under the statute, a robbery is just force. Whether you have a gun or not, it's a robbery. That's under the definition of what a robbery is. So when you have that, it could be pushing someone and then taking their merchandise or stealing their wallet. That's a robbery. It could be with a handgun. That's a robbery too. Obviously, there'd be additional charges, separate charges with that. So it's funny you should bring that up. And Assistant Chief Rekabon has been tasked with this, and Assistant Chief Tara is like, we need more information on the drill down for that to see how many times a gun was used. For example, the carjacking. Well, that's a robbery. So it won't even show up under the stolen motor vehicle. And this is FBI stuff too, by the way. So this isn't just like local here. It would show up as a robbery. So we need our own internal stats, our own mechanisms. There's no saying you can't manage what you can't measure. So if we continue to go forward, we're measuring, we're managing, and we're dealing with these things. And again, I appreciate the question. Please don't take my responsibility. I don't appreciate the question. You need to hold us accountable. It's your job to ask that question, 100%. And I will also close this out with, I don't think it would be appropriate for the police department, me, to withhold the whole foods from you from 3 or 4 weeks unless we're really leading into something. About a week or so later, some questions came out. We had run out a few things, and we're like, okay, we're good at this point. So I think there is a balance with there. And I'm not going to go through the long soliloquy, but the last time I discussed this, I gave an example where I really went out on a limb in Waterbury with a situation. If you guys remember, we talked about this, and there was a violent crime that happened. We didn't notify the public, but we had to do that. I felt, and I had the backing of the mayor at that time, to bring the culprit to justice. It was a sexual assault, a violent sexual assault, and it worked. And I think, I'm positive, had we put it out there immediately, it would have scared him away. He would have ran. Maybe would have got him later, but within less than a week or so, week and a half, we had that individual. It was a risk, but we had contingencies in place, just as we do now. So thank you. Oh, by the way, the other, taken to custody, and the other one is order to detain. I couldn't remember what the other one was. It's order to detain. Assistant Chief Rekabon, thank you for the text. You're doing your job. It's a raise.
Thank you, Chief Riddick. Over to you, Town Manager Ledwith. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. To your question, Councilor Cortez, I just really wanted to reiterate what the chief said. And the chief did call me the evening of the incident. We did talk it through. And we felt, I felt comfortable after that conversation that that was the right thing to do. As the chief said, 9.5 out of 10 times, we are going to share that information directly with you as soon as this information is in our hands. And this was one of those times where we just didn't feel it was prudent to do that. And hopefully everyone understands that. And I know it has been an active couple of weeks, certainly, and we all see that. But I do know that we have a force of 130 officers who are committed and dedicated to doing everything possible to protect all of us in the town of West Hartford. And I'm personally grateful for every officer who we employ and dedicates and commits their professional careers to protecting all of us. And I know we have the best here in West Hartford. So, and to the chief, your final thoughts on the incident in Bridgewater, I can simply say we have the right person in charge of our police department. So thank you for your leadership. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the time to say a few words.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any questions before I ask mine or have my comments? All right. Thank you, Chief Riddick. And I too want to say thank you for that Bridgewater video, because we had mega discussions in my family. In fact, a family member who resides in New Jersey with 3 small young boys ranging from the age of 2 to 5. And so that was a big concern for both she and her husband in terms of when her kids are old enough and go to the mall and are with their friends, and if their friends are white, is that something that they would encounter? So what I really appreciate about what you just did was focusing on the policy, because a lot of times that is lost in the general discussion, and usually you go right directly to the race issue, which is totally understandable. But I think what's important, especially in government, that policy is what's supposed to guide and direct you, and that is what you're supposed to follow. And so many times that is often lost, and that's why you have that ongoing training. And I applaud both you and Chief Priest for continuing to provide that training to our staff, and also to you, Town Manager, led with, picking up where the former town manager left off to make sure that that continues here in our particular town. So thank you for that, and thank you for the explanation and for the video showing as well. And I have a few other questions in terms of just the activity that has occurred in town. I want to say since the beginning of the year or towards the ending of last year. And one of my questions, and I know AC Rickabon and we had a short discussion at the event, Chief Priest and the promotions, and that is the smash and grab that occurred at the mall. And I'm wondering if there's trends that you all are seeing in terms of public safety and how you collaborate with mall security. Is there a way to be proactive? Is there a way to put mall staff in some type of proactive stance in terms of things that they could look for? And God forbid they don't want to, take on your role and do anything. But, just like, I guess, in jewelry or robbery in a bank, there's something for them to hit instead of trying to be, hero or heroic or what have you. I'm curious, in the recent events of all these things, how do we partner, with our private partners or mall security to either be on alert, or how to then, contact you all as public safety in a quick manner? That's one question. And then I'll get to my other questions about the things that happened, recently in town. I'm a believer of being proactive. How can we all be in this together instead of just saying, well, that's not my job, that's the police's job, or that's the firefighter's job? Because if we can get ahead of it and prevent it, or head it off, we'll be in a much better position. So I'll stop there so that I can hear your response.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, you've heard me echo those sentiments repeatedly. The problem is, how do you measure the crime you prevented? You know, how do you measure that? I don't have an answer to that. I don't think many of us do regarding that. Regarding your specific question, these flash mob robberies and larcenies have actually toned down recently, lately. Although the carjackings increased, at least the other stuff had stopped. We do collaborate with them all. I have at least a twice a year, a biannually meeting with myself, the Farmington Police Chief, the Director of Security at the mall, and the mall manager. We meet and we discuss these issues. You know, part of the problem here, and AC Rickabon, here's where I get myself in trouble, but you know me. Hopefully I'll pull myself out of it. You got to understand, some of these businesses, this is just a write-off, and they're willing to take the hit. And I'm not going to call any business out by name, but our detectives, our patrol officers, our community relations officers, we've had meetings with these businesses that got hit in the mall. We gave them tips on what we think they should do, where they should put certain merchandise and where they shouldn't put things. Sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. Their staff has been directed not to get involved. When I say staff, they're hired staff as well as security, and to contact the police, you know, when things are over. We'll respond. We'll do the best that we can. But until some of these businesses take this serious enough and not just write it off as a loss, you're going to have these things. And Madam Chair, you really hit the nail on the head. Crime prevention is a community partnership with the police department, and the community encompasses private, public, and law enforcement. And without those three working together, you're always going to have an outlet somewhere if one of those three are weak. And sometimes the public doesn't like to hear that, but it's the truth. If you're not willing to lock the door to your car, then someone's going to go in your car and steal your stuff. If you're not willing to lock your house and people know that, they're going to come to your house and steal your stuff. Do you have a right to leave your car door open? And should you be able to leave your home open? Oh, yes, you sure do. But be prepared for the consequences. And you really can't expect us to prevent that. But if we work together, like we are with our camera system, the downtown camera system that the town is pushing with the ARPA money to help us to be our eyes and ears, like we're doing with our beat officers going to all the downtown restaurants and stores and giving them information for our camera sharing and video sharing program, getting out to the different neighborhoods, giving these tips, talking to the businesses, explaining these things to them. We're trying to do our part, and we need help. We just can't do it alone, period. And one last point, you know, through our partnership with the mall, we actually have access to take over and have access to their cameras for certain situations. So there's a lot of things we are doing and we'll continue to do, and we'll continue for excellence. We'll continue to get better.
Thank you, Chief. And then my other question regarding the theft of the vehicle, I'm wondering, in your investigation, are neighbors cooperative, or, you know, when you see something or say something, are you being successful? Is the team being successful at least in trying, and neighbors or business owners being able to provide description or anything like that? If they saw something, are they willing to come forward and share that with the PD and the team?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd say overall, yes. There's times when it's no, but overall, yes. And unfortunately, you know, a couple of the shootings that we did have, and one that we had in Hillcrest, part of the reason, in addition to great police work, we were able to solve that shooting is some of the information we got from the neighborhood, from individuals, but it took some outreach, and also took, you know, some people who wished to remain anonymous, who contacted us and helped drive us in to look in a certain direction. So it's not all gloom and doom. There are some many positive components. So I think we are definitely making progress. But like anything else, complacency makes you hate the thing that made you great. And whatever that is, we must continue to worry about that evil thing called complacency, or it's not my problem, or it's not here, because it's each of our problems.
Thank you again for that. And I have a comment for that, but I'll wait. My other question, or it's more of a comment about the HANIC program with the police officers and the youth. I'm happy to hear that that's going very well. I was so excited when you and the team provided that presentation. So now that it's actually in play and moving along, I'm happy to hear about that. But I do have a question because I'm hoping that it will be a success for many years to come. Is there a tool in place to evaluate the outcome?
It is. I don't have the criteria myself, but we did have the discussions regarding that. Two things. One, this is not going to be a one and done. And number two, how do we evaluate success? What's our measurement? What's our metrics? What are we going to look at going forward? And part of that has to be some type of connectivity with these students going forward. So that being said, that's all I can provide you now. I don't know if Assistant Chief Rickabon has more information on that. So I'll punt to him, and he better earn his money right now.
So we've been talking.
You just muted yourself.
Yeah, you muted.
Does that work here? So I've been talking with Alfiatis.
We can barely hear you, Rob. I'm not sure if you get closer or something's happening with your microphone. Good play by your part not to talk. I like that. Very good. But you can very easily come over to my office and finish this conversation if your mic doesn't work. Why don't you do that, Rob? Come on over. Anyways, while he's coming over, I do have some quick stats regarding the robberies and carjacking. You know, anecdotally, we said this doesn't feel right. It seems like it may be some type of increase. So just looking, so we did a 5-year look back. So in 2000 and from 17 through 2022, in 2017 we only had one carjacking. In 2019 we had one. In 2020, we had 1, 2, 3. Those, one was physical, one was a gun, and one was a cane, if you can believe that. In 2021, we had 1, 2, 3, and of those 3, 2 were with a firearm. And then in 2022, thus far, we have 1 with a gun. So, you know, when you say you can feel it and there's something changing in the boldness and the brazenness, there's something to that. So again, we are tracking, we are going back just to make sure that our gut feelings match up with our stats. I will now turn over to the great Rob Rickabon, Assistant Chief.
I like this chair. This is nice. I need one of these. So going back to the HANIC program, what we're going to do is I'm going to sit down with Lieutenant Valfiaz, who's the commander of our Community Relations Division. We are meeting on a weekly basis after he does each presentation and doing an analysis of what the program was, what we did with the kids, did they feel successful, the officers involved within the program, and then the coordinators of the HANIC program themselves to see how it goes. And then at the end, again, we'll again do one more deep dive into the program, get some feedback from the kids in some way. Obviously, with the different ages, you're going to get different feedback of what they thought. We are going to incorporate a parents' night one night to bring the parents into it as well. So by the end, we should have a really good feel of how the program's working and then what other things we can add down the road and for the next time we run it.
Great. Okay, let me go over to Counselor Billingsmith.
I have scribbled all over my pages, but what days are you doing that? Are you doing it once a month, twice a month? And do you have dates that you can send? I would love to come in and just.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'll do is I'll actually have Lieutenant Valfiatis reach out to Public Safety Committee, and we will send you all the times and the days of what we're doing. And we'll also make sure that what we're doing that day, you know, in advance. So maybe you can even help out and participate in some way.
Awesome. I would love to do that. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Counselor Billingsmith, and thank you, AC Riccabon. So the other, I guess my last comment would be, I would like somehow, and I don't know, Mr. Ledwith, if we can try to incorporate this, but because I know for a fact when your community and your neighborhood is engaged, especially when I first moved to town, I had great neighbors, and they were like the eyes and the ears of the neighborhood. And so nothing happened without a telephone call being made. And so I don't know, maybe this is something for us to think about, how to get our neighbors more engaged, because when that happens, usually those type of activities go down. I mean, I'm not a police officer, just from experience. I know those activities that have eyes and ears open, anything that happened, a phone call is made, the word goes out, you know, you got to stay away from that neighborhood or stay away from that street or whatever the case may be. And, you know, I don't want to say that may solve it, but it may minimize a lot of the things that's going on. And it definitely has to be a collaborative effort. But how can we maybe re-engage residents and our community, that we got to get back to basics, you know, so that we keep everybody safe and it's a partnership among everybody. That would be, you know, my final comment. We're public safety, but it's not just fire, it's not just police, it's town council, it's our residents, it's our neighbors, it's everybody involved. We all have a stake in this. We all need to keep each other safe and have each other's back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. We certainly can explore that. We'll work through the Chief's office and certainly Sergeant Martin and possibly our PR specialist as well, Renee McHugh, and look at some kind of see something, say something campaign and involve the whole community and neighborhood.
Through you, Madam Chair, to augment that, just to remind folks, you know, we do have the Bishop's Corner meeting. We do have the Elmwood Association's meeting. There's always somebody from law enforcement there. I believe fire might have a rep, and other directors send their personnel to these meetings too. Maybe something we can consider, and I think it's with Bishop's Corner, they actually alternate the times. Sometimes it's in the morning, you know, sometimes it's in the evening, so we can get more participation from the community. And just tout those and puts more information out there so the public knows that they can go to these meetings.
Right. Thank you, Chief. Yeah. And they need to be eyes and ears too. I just remember when I was growing up, we didn't have all the technology that we have now and the sophistication that we had now. But if something looked awry, you know, you start seeing people appear out of everywhere. And whatever was about to go down, it was ceased. And so I just think, you know, if we just begin to promote that, a lot of the things that are happening now, it could be minimized. That's just my 2 cents.
No,
Madam Chair, this is Mayor. Sorry, this is Mayor Cantor, and I've been listening to you all, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful, very informative meeting. I mean, hard issues and really, really important. I just want to again thank Chief Priest, but Chief Riddick, you've highlighted so many things that you're doing such great work, and again, your leadership is tremendous, and we're really grateful. But Carol, it's a great point, and one of the things that what's unique about Bishop's Corner is it's a resident and business neighborhood association. The other neighborhood associations really are truly business associations. But what we do have are neighborhood associations throughout the town that we rarely speak to. Maybe it's the Buena Vista. Well, Chief, you've just spoken with Buena Vista neighborhood associations. Like those neighborhood associations are all residential, and they are very connected. And I think it's just a reminder. Maybe we can try to get a registry of those neighborhood associations. There's one in my we're a part of a neighborhood association. I know when Montclair Linwold was going through some of their environmental issues, they became very, very connected, and we have some good contact information. So maybe it's sort of building those connections and giving them some tools on how to develop, making sure you have those email lists, making sure you keep in touch with each other, and then, you know, maybe we can have contact information with them as well. So just a thought.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay. So that concludes the staff reports. Chief Riddick.
One last thing, one point of order through you, Madam Chair, a correction. I take back the credit I gave to Assistant Chief Rickabon. It was actually Lieutenant Dan Maffo who texted me with the order to detain information. So LT, thank you for listening in from home, and I owe you a coffee tomorrow. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you to Lieutenant Maffo and to you, Chief Riddick. The other thing I wanted to mention is you do have a very tall order with the new building, so I'm sure that's sometime down in the future or up in the future. So the other issue that I wanted to raise in terms of future agenda items, I know Councilor Cortez, you raised at the last meeting about the resolution that Councilor Fay had brought up, and I know we had discussed it, but I also know we had a transition between Town Manager Hart and Town Manager Ledwith. So perhaps Town Manager Ledwith, you can speak to, I know we're going to look at trying to work on that and reintroduce it and work with our legislative delegation. So can you speak to that a little more, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rick Ledwith, Acting Town Manager. I'd actually have to get up to speed on that, Madam Chair. So we will do that and be ready to report at our next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Do we have any other? Yes. Go ahead, Councilor Cortez.
So, Madam Chair, I think this meeting has been, I've only been to a handful of meetings, and I've enjoyed a lot of the stuff that has come out. There's been a lot of good conversation, a lot of good dialogue. There's two things that stand out is the facilities, because, it keeps coming up, regardless. And I know that should be a priority, and we need to, there's a lot of stuff going on in town. There's a lot of cranes up, and we have to look at, where do we prioritize and start working on maybe some modernization. And I know that once we start the budget meetings, a lot of this stuff with some of these things will come up, or make a little more sense for me. But the other thing with the resolution, a lot of the conversations we've been having today, engaging the community, trust, working together as, town, the town itself as town councilors, this public safety committee, police, fire. So a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about with the community, I think a great way to kick it off is to, really rethink how we were going to do the resolution, move forward with the resolution, but, have that kind of kick off, this community engagement, do bipartisan, work together and, frame up something that, really means something and we can stand behind. And I think that a lot of stuff we heard today, we can support a lot of those things, because we do have a strong police department. I'm amazed that we're just over 130 police officers, and I don't know how you split them up. I see them everywhere, all the time, night, morning, and I'm like, there's no way the math doesn't add up, because I feel that have a strong police force. So yeah, it is that community piece and that whole partnership, bringing everything together. And I think that when we frame up a resolution, we should kind of focus on that as well. That's my comment. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Counselor Cortez. And Counselor Fay.
Yeah, if I may, thank you very much. I just want to work together for sure. It has to come from all of us, but I think this is very important. Everybody's starting to talk about crime. Even our governor finally thinks we have an issue. So I think for us to sit on it for too much longer, of course we want it to be uh, worded properly and in the proper context and all that. So I'm supportive of that for sure. But I'd like to kind of put a time on this. It was submitted in October, and the people who are watching it and expect some action to be taken, yeah, they're getting a little impatient. So I want to help support this as much as I can. I'll be sitting with anyone who wants to sit down, take a stab at rewriting it, if that's the concern. But if we can kind of get our arms around what the problem is with it, and we can come up with something that we all agree upon. Crime is nonpartisan. It really isn't, and it shouldn't be. And I just, as leaders of this town, I know and I feel obligated to the people every day, every morning when I wake up. And this is something they're looking for us to do. So the reason that these matters are so important with information and things like that, I want the public to trust everybody on this council. And I think the sooner that we can move on things that impact everybody, and the sooner that we can have, some information to go with, I think it's just gonna make it better, and it's gonna restore pride and trust, and people will know that we're really working for them. So that's all I'll say about that, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor Fay. And back over to you, Counselor Cortez.
Yeah, one more thing. On the last meeting that we had, when I brought it up, I said I will reach out to Jillian Gilchrist because she sits on the Judiciary Committee. And I want you guys to know that, we have been going back and forth, just trying to schedule a time to meet. But between snowstorms and other things, it's been kind of hard to kind of sit down and get together. So I'm still trying to sit down and see what legislation might be coming up in place, that might be helpful to us so I can report back to the committee as well. So I want you to know that, I've been trying to work on that behind the scenes.
Thank you, Counselor Cortez. Okay, so do we have any other agenda items or future agenda items that we wish to put on for the next meeting or any future meetings? Okay, not hearing any. And Mr. Ledwith, did you have anything that you wanted to report out, or are you all set?
I am all set, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. It was a very productive meeting, and I appreciate all the dialogue back and forth between our fire chief and police chief and the various updates that took place as well. So thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so I'll close it out. But before I close it out, I'd just like to say, let's just all keep our brothers and sisters in the Ukraine in our thoughts and prayers, and pray for their safety, and pray that this thing ends and ends real soon. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, and let's watch each other's back out there.